Alright, yesterday I did a video where I went hiking and I ended up not even pulling out my nature journal at all. So all I did was hike and not nature journal. Right now all I'm gonna do is nature journal and not hike. So I'm right here outside of the dining hall at the Las Cruces Biological Station in southern Costa Rica. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do a little bit of a landscape beat though, even though it looks like the fog is rolling in. It's sort of a cloud forest here, as you can see, but there are lots of cool plants. There's even a botanical garden basically all around me. So I'm sitting right here because this is where the coffee is, and I'm gonna start looking at some plants, looking at a little bit of a landscape, and even just doing some writing in my nature journal. In this case, I'm not starting with a complete blank page. I have this awkward sized bit of blank space that I have to work with. This can have a mental effect and be a psychological obstacle, especially if the drawings or landscapitos or whatever you already have on the page look good or finished or polished. You might be afraid, and this can create a precious syndrome. You're feeling precious about that page. You don't want to ruin it with sketches or drawings that don't look good. So just being aware of that mental obstacle will help you deal with it. However, if you are dealing with a completely blank page, that has its mental obstacles of its own, and I have a whole video about it. Check out this link right here to see more about how to deal with starting a blank page and writer's block. I'm starting with a little landscapeito, and I'm using the gray side of my Fudayaku Pilot pen. This is one of my favorite pens, if not my favorite pen. I'm also using it for the writing. It works really well for creating a visual hierarchy, and you can see my full review of this pen at this link here. And starting a landscapeito with this gray pen gives you the chance to use the watercolors in a more dominant way. You can see I just checked my thermometer and I'm adding the temperature into these notes, and in this case I'm doing sort of more of a description instead of a small metadata tab. And written descriptions are a really powerful thing to include in your nature journal. It's easy to capture a lot of information quickly about the weather, about how you're feeling, about what's going on all around you, and combining that with a landscapeito is a great way to start a page. Alright, so a crested guan just flew into a nearby tree. I don't have a good spot down here to draw it, but I'm at least going to do a little bit of sketch of it up here before it flies off. Don't fly away, don't fly away. Oh, it's getting ready to take off. It's getting ready to take off. Notice how I'm able to move my eyes down to my page and work on my drawing without moving my binoculars. You can see a full video about how to use this technique of drawing while using your binoculars at this video here. Uh-oh. Don't go yet, don't go yet. Give me a second here. So I totally changed position on me, as birds often do while you're drawing them. Okay, you can hear the toucans. Okay, it kind of just looks like a turkey with a cormorant head, but at least I got something of it. Okay, so now this is really interesting. This was totally covered by fog just 10 minutes ago, and that is the subject of my landscapeito. So while it's not completely covered with fog, I am going to put in the color, but I still want to see if I can get a little bit of that fog effect, which is a growth edge for me, something that I've been working on. But you can see this is what I've been procrastinating for days, but look at how easy this is. This is where the self-awareness piece comes in, and it's really important to try to think, why aren't you nature journaling? Why aren't you doing a quick sketch? I spent almost an entire day yesterday without doing a single sketch. So what is it? Is it procrastination? We can come up with so many rationalizations for not sketching, not nature journaling, and usually if we do one, even a 5-minute session, we feel a lot better afterwards. So trying to be really careful with those rationalizations that we come up with for not nature journaling. Okay, so classic, the sky just keeps changing. Now it's even way different, so If I were painting with oils or another opaque media, this would be a lot easier. Getting this dark slope and then afterwards trying to add clouds on top of it is not really going to be possible. So I'm just going to have to start light and work darker the way we always do with watercolor. Luckily I have a really small, I actually stuck to a small landscape detail. Oh, by the way, one of the only bad things about Costa Rica is they don't have very good chocolate. This actually looks like it came all the way from Canada. Has more lecithin than cacao. Gray is always a challenging color because it is hard to get. A lot of times we have gray in the sky that is very, very light value, and it is hard to mix a light value gray. So you often end up making it way too dark, and the sky needs to be the lightest element. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna go ahead and do the way that I should do this, which is ideally what you do is you paint this sort of sky color behind almost everything else. This creates a color unity in your painting. It also helps simplify the process of creating the foreground darker, the midground medium, and the background lightest. So this is how I'm going to do it here. I'm basically just going to put that color over everything. Maybe I'll lift with a napkin, I'll lift a teeny bit, but as you can see, I basically just put that color over everything here. I'm going to lift a teeny bit from the sky here, and a little bit coming down here in case I want to show fog coming down here. Okay, now I have to wait for that to dry, which sucks here because it's very humid. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I could color other things from earlier, such as that guan, the crested guan. I could also add in my writing, my descriptive writing. So I don't really have that much time before it starts getting a little bit too dark. Sometimes it's fun to do landscape videos when it's really dark. It forces your values a little bit and it can be good practice. Oops, I forgot that the guan has red legs as well. Ideally, while you have red on your brush, you can do multiple things on your page that have that same color. Still wet down there. I don't have anything to measure the humidity, but it's probably pretty close to 100%. And my water brush with this slower flow just ran out of water. I always carry two water brushes though, one that is a newer one and one that is an older one. As they get older, the water flow becomes slower, and those are good for more delicate work. The newer ones have a much quicker, sometimes less controllable water flow, and those are good for larger areas of color, wet on wet techniques, bigger sort of landscape paintings.
I got completely impatient waiting for this watercolor to dry. Blowing on it wasn't working, so here I'm using a last resort where you rub your hands together and use your palm to dry the page. This usually is going to leave some undesirable effects, and your watercolor teacher would probably slap you for doing this, but it is a last resort technique, and I will be able to paint over it now.
Alright, fog is kind of moving back in a little bit. See that? Ooh, some kind of flower smells really good. If you run out of water in one of your water brushes, but you don't want to use the other one, what you can do is just switch the tops and the reservoirs. So I'm going to put my old slow flow one onto the reservoir of my new one, and vice versa. If you're in the field and you have an extra water brush, but for whatever reason you prefer one of the brushes, you can easily just switch the reservoirs like that. Now I'm going to take, I definitely don't want this green right here. This is a really saturated green, hooker's green. What I want is this really dark one here. As you can see, the humidity is making these kind of splooge out of their little areas. Some colors are more susceptible to that than others. So I'm just going to take this one. This is the Indanthrone green. Perylene green. It's my darkest green, and I'm going to come through, but I still don't want this to be, this isn't going to be my very darkest color yet. So let me water it down just a teeny bit, because I want these palms in the foreground. Or maybe I could use the fog a little bit to highlight the palms and make them darker. Okay, really glad that I'm not using the extra wet one right now, because even with this you can see that it's kind of pooling up. The water is pooling up. It's going to be a little bit hard to get these palms to stand out darker in front, because this is already a pretty dark. Ideally I would build this up and I would just paint through the palms with the same color, but then I think I would lose the underdrawing in this case. Oops, I should have left a little bit of fog there. I think that's the rufous-tailed Amazilia. Okay, in some ways I'm wishing I had done sort of an alla prima technique and tried to get the whole painting all in one pass instead of building up layers. If it's really humid conditions and your watercolor is drying super slowly, that can be a better approach.
Or you can just eat low quality chocolate while you are waiting for your layers to dry.
Okay, so while I was waiting for my water to dry, the complete landscape just got covered up again by fog. Some hotels have blow dryers, but not here. So while I'm waiting, I'll just go ahead and eat the rest of my chocolate bar and continue with my writing. I've started to cramp my style here by giving myself such a small area. Whoa. Some kind of owl or something just flew by. Things are drying so slow. I can even see like a mist moving through here. I'm gonna see if I can catch it on camera. I don't know if you can see it, but there's just like a mist drifting through right here onto my page. That's making it harder for anything to dry. so I might have to take drastic measures here. I didn't get the soft edges on the fog either. That's something that I need to work on. Capturing this look of fog in front of the lush cloud forest is something that I've been working on for a couple months in Ecuador and now here in Costa Rica. It's a challenging thing, but there's a certain look that's pretty common in these places and challenging to capture with watercolor. So I'm trying to figure out strategies for getting it. See, you can see there that I was able to use a little bit of lift, sort of like a lifting technique, reactivating the watercolor once it had already been put down. This only works with non-staining colors. That's one of the reasons why it's good to know what colors are staining and what colors are non-staining. Alright, this is sort of an emergency technique if you need to dry your watercolor faster, but it can change the color and everything. But the place where I have the most moisture still is also a place that's a little bit darker than the rest, so I don't mind if my hand lifts up some of the color. Oof, that left a lot more texture than I wanted from the palm of my hand, and now I have to be really careful not to transfer that color anywhere else. But this is a technique that can be used in extreme situations. Okay, and I'm gonna go for it now, and I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to create a little pool of color here with hardly any water. This is where sometimes water brushes give you less control than traditional watercolor brushes, and they might make it impossible to do certain finesse techniques like this and really have very precise control over how much moisture you're working with. One thing you can do is have an extra piece of paper. I used to always have an extra piece of paper here, or use a towel to control the moisture. Sometimes you can even wick moisture off of the edge of the brush up here while leaving the pigment on the tip, and in that way prepare your brush with a very dry pigment without very much water on it. And that's what I need in this situation of high humidity, where I need to basically just quickly put in the dark palm trees in the foreground. I might even mix in another color besides green and make this almost black. I could make this completely black if I wanted to. Or like gray, or even like almost like a purple color. So it seems to be working. The background seems to be dry enough. I'm not getting a wet on wet disaster. This should be a little bit darker. I might have to do these palm trees in 2 passes. I could just do them with a black drawing tool. Like oh, there is a no-see-um biting me on the finger. That's gonna itch for a long time. Okay, the no-see-ums might be coming up. Oh man, those no-see-um. Ah! I already smushed the no-see-um, but the bite is pretty bad. Put my brush in and it's hard to see my palette, and I ended up getting way more pigment than I was planning because the pigments are quite wet now from the high humidity in the air the last few days. It can become a total disaster in your watercolor palette if you're in high humidity conditions for too long. Things get really messy in there. Okay, I wish the background were a little bit darker, but I think that's basically what I'm gonna get. And especially since it's so dark that I can't really see the landscape anymore, so I think I'm gonna just call that good. So I managed to get a little bit of nature journaling here in at sunset in southern Costa Rica with no hiking, just nature journaling, just sitting on the porch outside of the dining hall, nature journaling. And this just shows you, like in a 30-minute session that you can get a little landscape in, you can get a little bit of writing in, and even a bird drawing just in that short session. Be sure to check out some of my other Costa Rica videos. I'll put a playlist right here with all of those. Nature journaling in the jungle, a whole bunch of other great ones. Nature journaling in the intertidal zone in Costa Rica. So check those out. And check out this link here to my Patreon to find out more about how you can support the channel and support the mission to use nature journaling to make the world a better place. And if you can't wait all the way until next week for the next episode of the show, as usual, check out one of these episodes here. Bye.